Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, everyone. I don't know what the problem is with the phone lines. A lot of times when I have this particular guest on, for some reason they don't want us to talk, but we're going to talk anyway, and we're not going to hold anything back because I get a little aggravated at the way things happen, as my guest also does. And so the scripts that are going on, I just want whoever to know who's doing the scripts, it does not work. That's just like I always start the show talking about how we like your comments, and we like you to be part of the show, but we're not here for bashing. So we're going to get this straight, but in the meantime, we have a lot to talk about, and I'm sure it's going to be a little controversial. I have some questions that are going to put him on the spot, and I'm sure other people do too. So first of all, let's introduce my guest. His name is Stephen Sindoni, and he is a filmmaker and a researcher and many other things. So Stephen, welcome to the show.
Nancy, thank you for having me. Strange things happen when I get near electronics equipment, unfortunately.
That's all right. We'll just continue, and hopefully whoever likes us to get screwed up here will just kind of go away. But anyway, Stephen, let's talk a little bit about who Stephen is, what started you to do the films, the research, and the whole bit.
Okay, well, basically, I was a regular guy. And it all started when I went to Montreal, Canada in 1998 on a vacation, and minding my business, I ended up running into some men who turned out to be agents of a foreign government who later on I saw photos of during the 9/11 investigations 3 months afterwards, and at that point I realized that there were people that were involved in this heinous act, and I tried to come forward. Nobody wanted to listen to me. Next thing I know, I became a person of interest, and the only way I could kind of fight back, so to speak, because I'm not really a fighter, was to learn to put the information out there any way I could, emails. I started creating YouTube movies, and as a result of it, I got pretty good in the process, and I started to do a lot more research. And I decided I was going to become a filmmaker, and the fact that they were going to take me out of the box, so to speak, I was going to do my best to create a new environment for myself and for everybody on the planet.
And it's really funny because a lot of times people who have information are either afraid to come forward with it for that same reason, Stephen, that you get tracked, you get chased, you be a person of interest. But I have to give you a lot of credit because you have gone through many things and yet you continue to put out information. Whether people really want to believe it or not is a different story. But if they do their research, I'm sure they will find out that just about everything, if not everything that you put out there, is pretty much right on. So when people try to get you to stop talking or stop you to do from whatever you're doing, just stay strong is my best advice for you, Stephen, and just kind of laugh in their face because the truth is going to come out, and it's going to come out more and more now, and you have helped the truth come out. So I'm going to ask you about your new undertaking, which is about the North Pole and the things that you found there, which is going to surprise a lot of people again. So we'll start that, and then I'll have some more questions for you. So let's talk about your latest adventure here.
Well, lately I was going in a different path. I was starting to develop a business plan, creating a comedy CD, and I was really getting away from the investigative. I was tired of getting my computer crash, changing my passwords every day, being followed, and all the things that go with being, I guess, what they call a mild-mannered Clark Kent, kind of a guy. And so I decided to take off my Superman cape for a while and not really to do any stories, because I realized that I had done over 500 stories, and it was just, at that point I realized, it was time that I probably do something different, because I felt people were still asleep and I would do something different. But what happened was I was in his studio one day, and I got an email from a gentleman by the name of Chris Baird. And he had watched some of my videos. He had watched, in particular, I think my videos on the Smoky God that I narrated, which was a story about Olaf Jansen. And he and his father, Jens Jansen, in 1829 took a sloop up to the North Pole and found an opening, and ended up spending 2 years with the inhabitants of the inner Earth, who happened to be 12 feet tall. So he had heard me do the narration on that, and then there was another story that I had done with Admiral Byrd's diary, which was an account. Whether it's real or not, I don't know, but I did the narration on that, where Admiral Byrd had claimed to had flown his plane into a North Pole opening and a South Pole opening on two separate expeditions, and he met a race of superior civilizations in the inner Earth that gave him a message to come back to our president and our leaders with. So when Chris had contacted me about that, he had told me that he had gone to the Denver Museum, and the Denver Museum it's the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and he took his kids there and to visit the Space Odyssey Center, and they were looking at a globe, and on the globe he noticed to take a look at Antarctica, and he saw a hole in the ice there, a large hole. It probably was, in his description, was at least 90 miles in circumference, wide and round. So it's a fairly large-sized hole that he saw there. So he had said to the man in the museum, "Do you realize this photo of this Antarctica here shows a hole?" So the guy was kind of like a little standoffish about it, like, yeah, I see it. And so he had taken a photo with it with his cell phone camera. And then he was watching a Discovery Channel documentary, and he saw a photo that they showed of another opening, possibly in Baffin Bay, and they took a photo of that as well. So now he contacted me on YouTube, and he asked if he could send me these photos. So I had no problem taking a look at them. So after that, we got on Skype together, and I decided I was going to talk to him about it, because he wanted to know what my take was, what I thought. And I initially said, well, I don't know yet. I mean, looking at the photos, I like to do a little more research on it and just see what I come up with. And after I spend a little time on it, let me get back with you. Because at that point, I would have a better idea, Nancy, as to whether these photos look good, were they doctored. I look at things closely and dissect them before I make an opinion, because I value my opinion, Nancy. As you know me now for a while, I don't give it away freely unless I love you to death. So I don't usually go out on a limb just to say something unless I've done my homework. So I did my homework on this, Nancy, and I started to realize that I needed to give it a closer look, and I did. And what I came up with was some interesting findings on that, and I ended up creating a video called the Baffin Bay Revealed. And in that video, I show the possibility that there could be an opening in that area based on the currents and the depth of the water.
See, a lot of people, Stephen, are going to go, oh, yeah, here's another guy who thinks he knows it all. And, everybody's going to say, I've researched this and I've researched that. people tend to not want to believe truth. And as they say, truth is harder to believe than nonfiction, because everybody goes, oh, this is a nonfiction, that's easy. But the truth, which is fiction, is much, much harder to believe because it is there, but most people go, well, I can't prove it. But see, you do the research, Stephen. And that's the one thing that I really like about you, is that you do the research.
Well, interesting enough, thank you for that. But here's what I found out thereafter. I asked the next question. So I said, if Baffin Bay is a hot spot, and does our military know about it? Are they aware of it? Do we have any Air Force presence up there? Is there a base up there? So I started looking, and come to find out, I found an interesting situation, that there is a base in Thule there in Greenland, and that we have a presence there in Greenland. But in 1968, there was a Thule Air Base B-52 crash. And why this is important, because in 1968, Nancy, we were not in wartime, but an airplane which was carrying 4 loaded hydrogen bombs ended up in the bay. The plane had crashed. 6 of the 7 people on the plane, the pilot and the co-pilot and everyone on the crew, except for one man, went down with the plane. But the plane went down in Baffin Bay area. And then for the next year and a half, our Navy was up there with submersible types of ships searching underneath the bay to see what they can find. And their excuse was that one of the hydrogen bombs might be live or active. But the Greenland officials started to wonder, because the United States was acting in such high secrecy, that they had to ask them to leave after a year and a half. So what made me wonder was, Chris had mentioned to me, Chris Baird, after he saw my story about that, because I tied that in with the lost tribe of Greenland, Eric the Red's people that lived in Greenland that had left in the I guess the 12th or 13th century, whatever it was, were in Greenland, and they decided to leave. But the Eskimos said that they left and went 30 days northward and found the milk of land and honey and never returned. So in the 1700s, when the people came from his country to Greenland, they found nothing whatsoever of any people, any graves, any bodies, nothing, no ships or anything. Eric the Red and 10,000 to 100,000 people mysteriously disappeared. And all they knew was that the Native Americans, the Native Indians said, the Eskimos said, that they went 30 days north to a place where there was caribou, where there was game and hunting, where they could be self-sufficient. So I started looking at this closely, saying, well, if this mystery's never been solved in Greenland, and it's only a 30-day journey, and Eric the Red only had 1 or 2 of maybe 3 possible ships, it had to be close enough to be like a ferry boat to go back and forth in order to shuttle these people back. And then I thought, well, how many months of the year is the water in that area unfrozen so that they can make this trip? And when I found out, it was from like June to early September. So Eric the Red only had 90 to 120 days, a window of time, to get all those people out off the Greenland, the landmass there, and disappear completely. So when I saw that we had crashed a B-52 in Baffin Bay, and with nuclear warheads in a time of peace, and we're very secretive about it, and then I looked at the depth of the water, because if you go on Google Earth or some other satellite imageries, you can actually see the unusual depth of the water in the bay. Now, from my understanding, the waters in the bay are not as deep as the water in an ocean. So that triggered me to think, well, wait a minute, how can a bay be so deep? Why are they not listing this as an ocean, but it's only a bay? But then I looked at the water currents in this area, and the water currents were almost like when you flush a toilet bowl. It's like a vortex, and the currents were very, very strong. So that pretty much tied in with the Olaf Jansen and the Jans Jansen, his father's story, where when they came around Greenland, and they were following their compass, the compass ended up pointing downward. They lost all semblance of any directions whatsoever. And instead of getting colder, the weather was getting warmer. And they ended up now not being in salt water anymore. Now they're in a warm body of water. And next thing you know, they see a sun, but not a sun like we have, more of a metallic type of a sun, a smoky god type of a sun. And they ended up meeting a group that was on a cruise liner. And this is like in 1829 in the hollows of the earth that picked them up. They were, from their little sloop that they were on, brought the sloop on board their cruise line, like probably a Carnival cruise line. And the people that picked them up were 12 feet in height tall. Now here's a man. Why this is significant to this, with the hollow earth? Because when this man, after spending 2 years in this hollow earth, he explained that he had been taken to the city of Eden, which is the capital, and he met with the king and the people in that city, and they let him roam around wherever he wanted. And after 2 years, he and his father wanted to return back to the outer world. So they could not go back north the way they came, they were told. They would have to go through the southern exit, South Pole. So they took the rivers southward and exited in the South Pole area, and they were picked up by a trawler somewhere in the southern hemisphere there near Antarctica. When they got picked up, well, actually, the father died before the son got picked up on the trip going back home. So when the son got picked up, they asked him what was he doing there, because there was no men anywhere near there. So when he told them his story, they thought he was crazy. So when he got back to his homeland a couple of years later, he told his uncle about it, and his uncle, was pretty well off. He wanted his uncle to give him money to be able to fund an expedition back, up north again to try to find his way back in. Well, it ended up his uncle turned him in, and he spent 28 years in an insane asylum. So here's a young man sent to an insane asylum, and then later on, after he came out 28 years later, he went back into legitimate business. He became a fisherman, and then did very well, and he moved to the United States, to Chicago, and then later on he moved to Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, on his deathbed, he met an author to write this book, George Willis Emerson, to tell the story about how he and his father went into the hollow earth, and that he waited till he was just about ready to pass across, because he had already spent 28 years in an insane asylum for telling the truth. So that one story is what got me interested in Baffin Bay and the areas around there with Eric the Red. But Chris got me to take a look at this again. So I listened, to my stories, and I looked closely at it. And then I go into meditation every day, as you well know, and I get things. And one of the things I'm going to break here tonight on your show for the first time is that I am a psychic intuitive. And I put things out there, and I get things back. And sometimes when I get them, I follow up on it. Sometimes I don't. A lot of times I'll get things come in from people that are passed over on the other side who need help in their doing their work on the other side. It may be hard for some people to believe who are listening, but there are people out there, such as myself, who can get that communication and tap into it. So when I get the guidance, I usually follow it, and sometimes I could be led to a book, a story, and then the information corroborates, and the story mysteriously writes itself, and I do this time and time again. I've written probably 500 stories, and you could probably find over 500 movies on YouTube, and a great deal of those stories come to me in that way. But after I did more research on this Baffin Bay thing, Chris and I started talking again, and he ended up putting together a video on YouTube, and now he has the Center Stars channel. And why this is pertinent is because he then showed photos of the North Pole, the South Pole, and what he believes some of the theories were behind it, based on the Bible, based on folklore, based on what a lot of civilizations and culture have been saying since the beginning of time, that there is a civilization living in the hollows of the earth, and even the tree of life in the Bible. If you go back to that, Nancy, Adam and Eve said they could live 1,000 years, let's say, but they were eating off the tree of life. And when the original sin was committed, this tree of life was taken from the outer earth and replanted back in the inner earth. And Adam and Eve now weren't able to live 1,000 years any longer. So now they had a normal existence because the gravitational pull on the outside is far stronger than it would be on the inside. And their sons and daughters, there's two sons, Cain and Abel, when they committed, Cain had killed Abel. One son, who the murderer, was banished into the hollows of the earth. So a lot of this biblical stuff tied in, and I started to look closely, and then I would, there was other books that I was getting involved with, the Arantia book that was channeled information, and it made a lot of sense when I tied it all in.
Do you think, Stephen, that our true being, we'll put it that way, actually comes from some other place other than what we've been told as far as the Bible goes? I mean, because here's my take, and a lot of people are not going to like my take. And it's not that I don't believe the Bible. I just know that it's been rewritten several times over, and every time it has been, people, I'm sure, have added their own story. But you see my take, and again, I'm going to make this statement, and it's going to make a lot of people mad, but they need to think about this. If the Bible is true about Adam and Eve being the first people on earth, and all of us have been formed from them, then basically our entire whole being is made up of incestual relationships, okay? Because if those are the only two that were available, we have to be related to all of them some way, somehow. What if, instead of the star that the three wise men were following, according to the Bible, happened to be a spaceship that crashed? Would that be possible, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I have a neighbor who's a science teacher, and we even looked at the time frame, the Nativity Star. I did a video called Nativity Star, and we, based on where the stars were in the sky that night, we figured out that the date was wrong that they gave us in the Bible. So, I mean, there are interesting things, and where these men had to be, where they were when they saw it. There's only certain places they could see it from. It was a star that was seen. It was not a ship. It was a star. It could have been a starship, possibly, but there were stars that directed them, and they were standing in the position of Iraq or Iran, and they made their way back towards Jerusalem. So that's where they were when they initially saw that star that brought them to Bethlehem. Now, what I got, I didn't know if I was going religious here on you, but I will. Through my channeling, through the Arantia book, through what I've learned, the Christ individual is someone that there is seven different super universes in our solar system, for example, and each has maybe over 10,000 planets in each, and we are the furthest outpost of the 7 super universes. In our universe, for example, there is 1,000 in our super universe, and we are one of the furthest outposts in the cluster of the 7 super universes. So to understand this, we are the furthest outpost from the 7th super universe, which is still not even near where Havana is, which is where God is supposedly to reside. So if you realize, we are only here on Earth a small speck of the overall 7 super universes the super omnipresence created. And what was done was that the omnipresence created a Christ-like presence, and this Christ-like presence with a female presence, because it's a yin and the yang, the male and the female, would spread that spirituality throughout each super universe And what they did was they had to plant the seed. So picture Adam and Eve as a couple who would procreate on every planet in every super universe. And what was supposed to happen was that they were supposed to procreate and create in that environment, when the environment was ready, for 50 generations before they were allowed to copulate with the people on that planet. So what the fall of Adam and Eve was that Eve and Adam, well, Eve was coerced into having sex, not the apple, with a man who was tricked to have sex with him because Adam was away. And what happened was she committed a cardinal sin, and because they broke that 50 generation rule, that was the cardinal sin, and that's why the tree of life was taken from earth. They were banished out of the garden, so to speak, and then their first son and daughter, the first two sons, end up committing the first murder because now there was supposedly the fall of man. But Adam and Eve were pretty much the test tube experiments on every planet throughout the solar systems and the universes, and there were many Adamic stock, and they weren't white in color. They were violet. And so initially they were the violet race, which when we mixed later on became the white race later on. So that's why the white race, the Aryan race, thought they were superior because they believed they came from the Adamic stock.
Yeah, but in reality, a lot of us came from that stock.
Yes. Now,
Think about it.
There were, at the time, on this planet, other civilized men and women that we hear, other colors, other races of colors. You had orange, there were green, there were blue, there was yellow man, red man, and there was a brown man, and the black man was called indigo. So these were the other races that we hear on the planet. The white race didn't come till later, till Adam and Eve came later, which suggests that they were not first. They came later because the planet had to evolve to a certain state before it was ready to have intelligent life copulate here. So in every planet, what I've learned and what channels come to me is that before a planet is ready, the environment has to be right. There's a man by the name of Edward J. Meister in 1967, I believe. While he and his family were up in Utah, they found footprints and in sandals. Embedded in the sandal was a trilobite, and the sandal was about a size 10. Man's sandal, similar to a sandal that we make today. It was dated when they finally dated the sandal and the trilobite. The trilobite is extinct about 250 to 350 million years ago, which suggests that this man who was on this planet before there was only a vertebrate insect, like a snail, who stepped on it, was here before this planet was even able to support human life as we know it. So my question is, if a man was on this earth 400 million years ago and he was looking around to see if this planet would support life, that would suggest a higher intelligence, would it not?
It would suggest much higher intelligence by looking around today.
So now what you have to
right.
So when this gentleman brought this information to the scientists, they tried to debunk him, but there's no debunking the fact that this sandal with this trilobite, which is extinct, how can this be? And these are some of the shenanigans that go on with control and cover-up, what they don't want people to know, because what happens is it takes away the 12,000, 15,000 year timeline for Christianity and all the other religions. So you can't control the masses unless you can create this timeline, and as soon as the timeline shifts back, the people in power start losing their control, and next thing you know, they start taking out the messengers who are bringing this information, or in some cases, they send out their supposed so-called expert to debunk them, or to make them look bad, or to threaten them, or maybe to tell them if you don't stop speaking, we're going to kill one of your children. We'll take all the money that you have. They'll figure out a way to stop you from changing our existing paradigm. For example, California, there was a Calaveras skull that was found in 1861 by a Mr. Madsen, who turned over the skull to the man who was in charge of the California Geological Survey, and Mr. Whitney. And it turned out, when this man from the Geological Survey examined this skull to find out how old it was, he said it was over 50 million years old, and it was a human skull. So here it is. There's, in the rock, embedded below the lava, which suggests it was a million years old, is a human skull where they found next to it like dinosaurs and other creatures to show that man coexisted with these animals long before man was supposed to be on the planet. And then it would suggest the fact that, well, what about Darwinity, the theory of Darwinism? Did we derive from a monkey? Well, absolutely not. So when you get to see this, was the earth created in 7 days? Absolutely not. So when you start to realize that what you have been told to believe blindly is really, nothing more than made up stories only to control you, and those people who want to, give the messenger a hard time for telling them the truth, I'm sorry I woke you. A lot of things I've said tonight, I didn't know what direction I'd be going into, but I think it's important for people to know this and to realize that's why when I try to get on the radio, I have such a hard time speaking things, because I can cover a multitude of topics, and most people don't like their paradigm to be shifted one iota.
Yeah, but it needs to be shifted. So knowing that our history goes back many, many millions of years than what we've been told, if we take a look at Hollow Earth, and there's different entrances all over the world, because as you know, Stephen, I have interviewed Brooks Agnew, I have interviewed Colonel Billy Fay Woodard, and they come up with somewhat of the same story, but not really exactly the same story. And Billy Fay is supposed to be from Hollow Earth, and Brooks Agnew is trying to find Hollow Earth. And some of the facts that you've already stated, when I interviewed Brooks Agnew, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, he, made the statement that he is planning on doing an expedition that's going to go to the North Pole to find the opening for Hollow Earth. And the same time that you stated about the water being calm enough to do that, or open enough or free enough, is actually the same time that he stated. And so with the latitude and longitude that you came up with, there is a picture that you have on the YouTube video that you have done. And I'm going to want you to give that out again, because I want people to go take a look at it, because it shows not just the opening, but it also later in the video shows how a flying saucer, spaceship, UFO, whatever you want to call it, could very easily go into that opening.
Oh,
so
exactly.
My thing is, when I talked to Billy Fay Woodard, he explained to me how everything in Hollow Earth is so much bigger than here on Earth. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, for example, have you seen that movie, the Mystery Island series that has Rock in it, the wrestler? He said it shows these huge bees that they ride on. He said that's kind of like what it looks like. And I said, well, do you think people from the outer surface would have a hard time accepting the fact that, one, there is a Hollow Earth, and two, it's pretty pure, and three, that there's all these big, big things in there, like you talked about a 12-foot person or a being. So your story kind of goes in with different stories from different people that I've talked to.
Well,
so
when you mentioned Brooks Agnew, let's start with that here. I was out at the ranch, James Gilliland Ranch, about 3-4 years ago, and he goes to the James Gilliland Ranch. But at the time, I was told about his expeditions and didn't get to meet him. One time, James was supposed to interview me, and he was going to go on vacation, and so Brooks was supposed to interview me, but James ended up not going, and he interviewed me instead of Brooks. So I started to hear the name Brooks Agnew, and then when he mentioned about the leader of his expedition mysteriously dying, and he took over. And I said, well, you know, the guy died in mysterious circumstances. And then he mentioned the fact he took $2 million on that expedition, and he mentioned people that were supposed to be going with him that didn't have a clue when they were asked, well, you were invited, weren't you? Well, no, I don't know anything about it. So a friend of mine made the point to me, and I didn't make the point, but it was a good point. He says, he mentioned he collected $2 million in this endeavor. I said, yeah, he did say that. He says, well, I hope if he doesn't go up there in August, you know, that he gives back that money. I says, well, it would be the right thing to do that. And then, you know, I started to ponder things, and I asked Spirit about that. And what I got was, I worry for the 100 people that are going to go with him. And I'll tell you why. Very easy to never be seen again. And then he looks like a hero in all of this. So I would be very suspect to be one of those 100 people to want to venture with him, especially if he was only going to go to the rim of an opening and not go in. Now, I don't know about you, but the Marines go in. They don't stand at the entrance.
Right.
So I'm not going to give you money or to go on an expedition if I can't get on the ride. So that, you know, my answer. And what I found interesting with that was, and you know, the time frame you had mentioned, and I'm just going to go by facts, so people could think what they want, but I listen very closely. You have a convention on a certain date. He mentioned that he was supposed to be in the Hollow Earth area looking for it on the same date. And I said to my mind, he's going to be the first man on this planet who's going to be able to split the atom. How in the world can he commit to Nancy Wallace to be at her convention if on the air at the same time and coming out of the side of his mouth is that he is supposed to be up near the North Pole on that same given time? Does make you wonder.
Yes, and I sent him an email and asked him that question. I have not heard back from him. So, you know, I sent him an email and I said, after our interview, Brooks, I thought about the dates that you stated that you were going to be on this expedition. You stated the last part of July, beginning of August. I said the conference is August 10th, 11th, and 12th. And I want to know if you're going on this expedition, if you truly believe that you're going to be back, because you stated it was going to be a 15-day expedition. And I said I would find it useless to buy you a ticket from my conference if you are not going to be showing up because you're on this expedition. So I'd really like to have an answer from you as soon as I can. Now, I interviewed him, I think, 4 weeks ago now. I have still yet to hear back from him. So if I don't hear back from him in about another week, I will send him out another email and ask him the same question. You know, because I'm like you, Stephen. I listen very well to what people tell me. Whether I make a comment or not, it's a different story. But I do listen very well.
So you're right. You're a lot like me, and that's probably why. And, you know, I encourage anyone, anything I say, to go check the facts. I have experts check things that I come up with, and they can't refute anything that I've said. And one of the things which makes me, I guess, a stickler for the truth is that I do not back down from any person, place, or thing. There's nothing I'm afraid of. These people in pink, I will call them, are just flies on the wall, and they're just squirrels trying to get a nut. And I'm not nuts. They are, because their time is almost over. These lies now are coming to an end. People need to see it for what it really is and expose them for what they are. They're all crooks. They're all liars. They're all tenured crooks. And when you collect $2 million, and I hope that he does what he's supposed to do, but as I say, I get things from the other side. I get things I'm connected, and I will say prayers for those 100 people that they don't end up in harm's way. And
right.
Brooks has a show. Yeah, Brooks has a show, and if he wants to contact you and contact me, I'm going to tell him put up, if not shut up, and give back people their money, because it's not right on a false pretense. And I just wonder, I mean, if I was a doctor, I'd love to do an autopsy on the person who was in charge of the expedition before he died, and they made him boss.
That would be interesting.
Because I know for a fact, I'm going to go out on a limb here, I know for a fact that someone he was very closely associated with is working for the government as an agent, and now she became his close confidant for a while. And birds of a feather, my dear, usually flock together.
Which is true. So we're going to go back to the information for Hollow Earth, because I believe that there is. I've believed in it for a very long time before I ever met anybody, before I ever talked to anybody, because I have a very hard time believing in all the stories that we have been told from the time we were young children growing up until now. And so I cannot believe that we are the super beings that people claim to think we are, and that nobody else out there is any smarter than we are. You know, plus it would make perfect sense with all the prophecies that come from the Native American Indians, as well as other countries, you know, come up with about different informations. Now, the Hopi prophecy, along with the Navajo and the Zuni, have all stated that when the Earth was going to go through some really hard stuff with weather changes and all that, they were taken into a place they called Hollow Earth. So I have a very hard time believing that all of these people can be wrong, Stephen.
Well,
and then you
right.
come up with the latitude and longitude, and you come up with this video. So give out how they can see this video that we're talking about.
Well, there's a number of places they can see it. The first place they can see it is on youtube.com/WEBFLIXSGUI. That's Webflix Guy. They can also see it on my new site, which is not a YouTube site. It's StevensWorldTV.com. That's STEPHENSWORLD TV.com. Or they could also see it on livestream.com/StevensWorldTV. I decided to create my own network, the Stevens World TV network, because as you know, I've created hundreds of videos on YouTube. I was tired of getting my counters stopped, comments blocked, people disconnecting my passwords, my emails, and everything associated with people trying to get a hold of me because I was trying to get a message out. So I've given up on the YouTube completely because they've decided that they want to be able to silence people for putting out messages that conflict with the existing controllers. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get to what you wanted to get to, and that was basically the longitudes and latitudes. I'll tell you the latitudes and latitudes, and then I'll tell you the story. Everybody listening, grab your pencils and papers, but I will caution you that if you try to look it up under Google Earth, you may find these longitudes and latitudes expunged, and you may not be able to see it. There are other places that you can look for satellite imagery. I suggest you do your searches there. But if you can't do any of that, then my video is that you'll be able to see the Edward Thiel mystery, or Antarctica's secrets revealed, Aliens Among Us, will show you the longitude and latitudes and actually show you the openings that were discovered. And I'm going to tell you about the mystery that surrounds that. So right now, the exact locations can be found in the Transantarctic mountain range in Antarctica. It's probably about 90 miles from the ocean, so it's very close to a body of water there. But remember that in Antarctica, temperatures could be from anywhere from 80 below to 120 degrees below zero, so it's quite frigid. So likelihood of having any man on that continent is very small, if at best. The exact locations for what I believe, I'm going to call it number one, and I'm going to call it an arrival entrance. There is a face of an alien on the entrance next to the hole going in to this cavernous opening. Now, the whole opening, when I measured it, is about 2 football fields wide and 1 football field long. They camouflage half of that, so that way from the sky you won't see all of it. So they modified the hole, but in the rock, or actually in the mountain, because this is on the top of a mountain. These mountains in the Transantarctic Mountains are probably 13 to 14,000 feet in height. So the only way you could see these openings that I mentioned is from an aerial view. So I found an aerial view and hit the exact locations for the arrival entrance with the face of an alien on it. The latitude is 66.553280. The longitude is 99.839330, and that is for number one. Number two is only 5 miles south of number one. It is in a direct line from it, which I believe is a departure entrance. It's also 2 football fields wide and 1 football field down, scaled down. But on the right of it, it has like a metal cover that's been made there, a metal shift cover, which could not have been made by man, because I said it's 80 degrees below zero, if not more, up on this mountain. So there's no way that we have the technology to do that I'm aware of. And the latitude on that second location is 66.603530, or the longitude is 99.719853.
Okay, so we're going to repeat it again during the second hour, so don't panic if you didn't get it just yet. But, Stephen, I want you to give out where they can go see this video.
Okay, well, they can see it at youtube.com/WEBFLIXSGUY, or they can see it on livestream.com/Stevens World TV, or they can just go to stevensworldtv.com, and I have a number of tabs there. Just scroll down the tabs and you'll find it either under Legends or Mysteries, or you might find it under Talk Show or Interviews. I have it listed, but it is in those 3 places. And if you have a problem with any of that, just Google my name under videos, or YouTube my name under videos, and just type in the titles Antarctica Secrets Revealed, Aliens Among Us, or the Dr. Thiel Mystery, and you'll be able to see all that. So that's where all that is.
The video is very interesting, Stephen, because, like I said, at the end it shows how a UFO, flying saucer, whatever people want to deem them to be, actually fits right in there perfectly. And on that video also shows the face of the alien that you're talking about. So it is a very interesting video that I think people ought to really check into. Again, you don't have to believe what we're saying, but you can check it out, see if you can find those coordinates. I've heard before, Stephen, that those coordinates are very hard to find, and very seldom do people find them, and they don't understand why. And so it's because people don't want them to be found, obviously, but they question it for that particular reason. So if somebody, Stephen, has a question for you or would like to get a hold of you after our interview is over, do you want to give out how they might be able to do that?
Right now, I would rather not at this point. I just feel that I want people to do their own homework, and I'm just here to provide the information. I'm not here to be bashed, or I need to separate what I'm saying from who I am, so I really don't want to get into that. They want to go to my websites, they want to get involved with all that, but I don't really want to get involved in answering any more questions than I'm answering tonight right now. So, for privacy reasons,
but they can go to your...
Right, they can go to all the information.
But they can go to your website.
Absolutely. And
you have...
Go ahead, Nancy.
You have many, many videos out there. You know, if they go to your YouTube. Now, are you going to take those videos that you have on YouTube and put them on the new site?
Some of them I will, and I'm going to create a multitude of others. So I'm about to go into another direction, but some of them I will.
Okay, because I mean, a lot of them are very, very interesting.
Well, I'm not going to take anything down.
Haven't...
I'm not going to take anything down, but if they just search my name, I mean, under Google videos, they'll see like 1,000 different videos, and they're all there for free. I'm not going to take them down. I'm about to create, as I mentioned, a whole new paradigm, a new talk show network. Hopefully, you'll definitely be a part of it with other people as well who want to band together with me and make a big change, a big splash as we go forward. And that way I won't have to worry about people trying to knock me off or not allowing me to get on the air. I'm going to control the airwaves like Obama thinks he does. I'm the man. I can break down the myths, and I have the legends. So,
yeah.
I mean,
but that's good.
You know, he can bring his teleprompter with him and bring his lunch. It'll be a long day if he wants to debate me.
I don't know if he'd be
so
strong on doing that.
He'd run the other way. He'd run back to Thailand.
He just might. Now, we're going to...